Welcome to this deep dive. Today, our mission is to completely flip how you think about, well, rules, risks, and red tape in business.
It is definitely a topic that needs a bit of a rebrand.
Oh, absolutely. We are unpacking a blueprint from the GRC PROS blog titled Scaling Security with Intent, a blueprint for modern GRC.
Right, and they make some really fascinating points.
They really do. And to understand why governance, risk, and compliance is actually the secret engine of hyper-growth startups, kind of have to think about a Formula One race car.
Okay, a race car.
Yeah, like when you look at one of those machines, the first thing you notice is the aerodynamics, or the engine, the sheer terrifying speed of the thing.
Sure, that's what they're built for.
Right, but engineers will actually tell you that the real secret to a race car speed isn't the engine at all, it's the brakes.
Which sounds incredibly counterintuitive, you know? I mean, the entire purpose of brakes is to stop forward momentum.
Exactly, but if you think about the psychology of the driver, it makes perfect sense. If you don't trust your brakes, if you don't know for an absolute fact that they can handle the friction when you're hurtling toward a hairpin turn at 200 miles an hour, you are going to drive tentatively.
You're going to hesitate.
Right. Having massive high-performance brakes is the specific mechanism that allows the driver to keep the pedal to the floor until the absolute last millisecond.
So the confidence to push the limits really comes from knowing the safety mechanisms are dialed in perfectly.
Exactly. Which brings us to the core tension of the blueprint we're looking at today. If you're a developer, a founder, or just someone fascinated by how modern businesses actually function, you know that GRC has historically been viewed as the ultimate set of corporate brakes.
Yeah, it's always felt like a boring reactive checkbox exercise.
Completely. But the authors of this post point out a massive shift in the modern economy. Startups used to have years to slowly build up their security and compliance programs. It was a gradual evolution.
Right. But today, hypergrowth startups are onboarding Fortune 100 clients within 6 months of launching.
6 months. From an idea to handling data for massive global banks.
And speed like that creates an immediate severe friction point. The source highlights a very delicate balancing act modern companies face because, implementing too much security too early just creates friction.
Yeah, you slow your developers down to the point where they get frustrated.
Exactly. They get frustrated and start bypassing the system entirely. They spin up unauthorized cloud servers or use unvetted software, creating what the industry calls shadow IT, just to get their jobs done.
So the heavy brakes actually cause the driver to start ignoring the steering wheel altogether.
Right. But if you swing the pendulum the other way and implement too little security, you are looking at severe risk exposure.
And maybe more importantly for the survival of a young business, you create massive sales blockers, right?
Oh, absolutely. An enterprise client's procurement team simply will not sign a contract if your security looks like a leaky bucket. You end up with all these missed opportunities.
So finding that middle ground is why the old, slow way of doing GRC is fundamentally broken. It simply doesn't fit the sheer velocity of modern business.
No, it doesn't fit at all.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that leads us to the first big principle in the blueprint, which is right-sizing your armor. The shift is moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach to what they call proportional controls.
Right, because the text argues that applying a Fortune 100 compliance framework to a 50-person Series A startup stalls their agility completely.
Yeah, it's like trying to secure a one-room startup office by installing the biometric security system of a nuclear power plant.
That is a perfect way to visualize it.
Right. You blow your entire budget on a retinal scanner, but you haven't even built the roof yet.
You're pouring resources into hypothetical threats while totally ignoring the foundational structural gaps.
I do have to push back on this a little, though. When I hear a phrase like right-sizing, my corporate buzzword alarm immediately goes off. I mean, isn't right-sizing just a convenient, polite excuse for startups to skimp on their security budgets early on?
Yeah. You would think so, but taking a hard look at the tactical advice in the text reveals that it is explicitly not about skimping.
Okay.
It is about tuning your controls to actual, measurable risk, rather than hypothetical worst-case scenarios. The blueprint specifically points to quantitative risk models to do this. They mention the FAIR model, which stands for Factor Analysis of Information Risk.
How does that actually work mechanically? Because risk always feels like such a, subjective thing to measure.
Well, that subjectivity is exactly what the FAIR model eliminates. Historically, companies use subjective heat maps. Someone in an IT meeting would say, I feel like a hacker breaching our database is a high risk, so let's color that red.
Right. It was based entirely on gut feeling.
Exactly. But the FAIR model replaces those feelings with math. It calculates risk by quantifying two very specific things: the probable frequency of a loss event happening and the probable magnitude of financial loss if it does happen.
So instead of saying, hackers are bad, that's a red level risk, the security team is going to the board and saying something much more specific.
Right. They'd say, based on our current traffic and industry data, there is a 20% probability of a ransomware attack this year. And if it happens, it will cost us exactly $450,000 in downtime and legal fees.
Wow. Yes, and that mathematical approach changes the entire conversation.
It really does. It allows an organization to prioritize controls based on actual business impact. You focus your engineering efforts and your budget on the areas of highest exposure for your specific stage of growth.
That makes a lot of sense. And the source outlines a very practical evolution based on this math. Like, you don't start day one by building a multi-million-dollar continuous authentication system.
Right. You implement scalable, progressive controls. You start with foundational things like basic two-factor authentication.
And then only as your organizational complexity and the mathematical risk increase do you evolve that into adaptive multi-factor authentication.
Exactly. The controls grow proportionally alongside the business reality. You are building a foundation that you can actually carry without collapsing under its weight.
But that brings up a massive logistical problem. Let's say you've done the math, you've figured out your right-size controls, and you know exactly what security measures you need.
Okay.
How do you inject those measures into a fast-moving software product without those controls becoming a giant, frustrating bottleneck for the engineers?
Well, now we're looking at the clash between modern development and traditional GRC. Today's environments are driven by DevOps, agile methodologies, and CI/CD pipelines.
Right, CI/CD, which stands for continuous integration and continuous deployment.
Exactly. Developers are pushing new code daily, sometimes hourly. The software is constantly evolving.
Which completely breaks the traditional audit model.
Yeah.
I mean, a static code base from 10 years ago is like a fortress, right? An auditor can walk around and inspect it once a year.
But a modern CI/CD pipeline is like a busy international airport. You need security checks running continuously on every single piece of luggage without ever stopping the conveyor belt.
Yeah. Traditional GRC practices like quarterly audits or biannual manual penetration tests, those were designed for the fortress, not the airport.
Right. Trying to apply a quarterly compliance check to code that changes every 3 hours is an exercise in futility.
It sounds like a toll booth on a highway. You're cruising along at 70 miles an hour, trying to launch a new feature, and suddenly the compliance team makes you slam on the brakes.
Roll down your window, hand over some paperwork.
Exactly. Wait for the gate to go up, and then try to get back up to speed. What this blueprint suggests is entirely different. It's like getting rid of the toll booth completely and just having lane assist built directly into the car itself.
I like that analogy. The authors call that concept security as code. The guiding philosophy behind it is guardrails, not gates.
Guardrails, not gates.
Yeah, you are not stopping the developer to check their work. You are providing an environment that keeps them on track automatically.
So if developers are living in collaborative tools like GitHub and Jira all day, how do you inject a compliance rule into that environment without driving them crazy with alerts?
Well, you embed the controls directly into the workflows they already use. The source references best practices from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation for this.
Oh, nice.
The mechanical secret here is automating policy enforcement at the earliest possible stage. Take linting, for example, which is an automated process that analyzes code for stylistic errors or bugs.
Or secret scans, which comb through new code to make sure a developer hasn't accidentally left a plain text password or an AWS API key exposed in their draft.
Exactly.
I can see how that would be a nightmare if it slipped through to the live product.
Oh, a massively expensive nightmare. So rather than waiting for a security review before launching the product, you automate those linting checks and secret scans.
To run when? Exactly.
To run the exact millisecond a developer tries to commit or merge their new code into the main project.
Oh, wow. So you catch the error instantly, before it even leaves their laptop. If you wait until production deployment, you're back at the toll booth. You stop the momentum.
Exactly. Shifting compliance to the left, meaning doing it earlier in the timeline of the development cycle, is the key. And to make it stick, the blueprint emphasizes integrating native GRC platforms directly into dev-centric tools like Slack or GitLab.
So instead of a security auditor knocking on the developer's door 3 months later saying, hey, remember that database feature you built back in February? It's not compliant.
Right, which happens all the time.
Yeah. Instead of that, The system just pings them on Slack in real time at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. It says, hey, your code is missing a license check, or you left an API key exposed. Fix it before you hit save.
And because of that, the friction is reduced to near zero. The developer fixes the line of code in 30 seconds and moves on. The momentum is preserved.
Okay, so internally, the company is now a well-oiled machine. They have right-sized their controls using the FAIR model math. They have lane assist built into their CI/CD pipeline, and they are moving incredibly fast.
Very fast and securely.
Right. But here is where the blueprint gets really interesting. How does a startup prove this invisible internal security to an incredibly skeptical outside world? Like those Fortune 100 enterprise buyers we talked about earlier.
Well, that brings us to principle 3 in the blueprint, which is scaling trust alongside growth. As a company matures, trust transitions from being a warm feeling into a highly tangible business asset.
It becomes a primary market differentiator.
Exactly.
The source recommends something that honestly surprised me, though. It says startups should build a public trust center early on.
A dedicated public-facing webpage.
Yeah, where they communicate their security posture transparently, listing third-party audits, incident response disclosures, even lists of the sub-processors they use. But why would a startup broadcast its internal security posture publicly?
You think it sounds risky?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't detailing your infrastructure give hackers a roadmap of exactly how your systems are set up?
It is a very common fear. But connecting this to the broader reality of the modern economy explains the shift. Enterprise buyers, procurement officers, and risk managers at major banks, they simply do not accept vague assurances anymore.
Right. Having a generic, we take your security seriously, banner on your homepage means absolutely nothing to them.
Nothing at all. They demand hard operational evidence.
So transparency is the only currency they accept to close a deal. But how do you provide that evidence without overwhelming your own team?
The blueprint advises mapping your internal controls early to recognized, rigorous global standards. Things like SOC2, ISO 27001, or NIST frameworks.
And critically, they suggest using modern GRC automation platforms to continuously collect the evidence that proves you're meeting those standards.
Exactly.
I want to drill into that evidence collection part because historically that has been a nightmare. I mean, it used to involve an engineer sitting at their desk on a Friday night, manually taking hundreds of screenshots of AWS server settings just to prove to an auditor that a firewall was turned on.
Oh, yeah. The industry calls it audit fatigue for a reason.
Right.
Manual screenshots and analyst spreadsheets were the old way. Modern GRC platforms plug directly into a company's infrastructure via APIs. They continuously pull the logs, the JIRA tickets, and the configuration settings automatically.
So they replace manual audit fatigue with continuous real-time proof.
Yes. And if a company takes that continuous stream of proof and curates it into a public trust center, they aren't giving hackers a roadmap. They are demonstrating a level of maturity that builds massive buyer confidence.
It proves to the enterprise client that the startup isn't just making claims. They have the receipts, and they're updated daily.
Turning that back-office compliance burden into a frontline sales tool actively accelerates the sales cycle. The enterprise client sees the trust center, bypasses their usual 3-month security review, and just signs the contract.
Let's follow that trajectory. So the strategy works perfectly. You land the big enterprise buyers, your trust is scaling, and suddenly you are expanding globally, which sounds fantastic.
Until you realize you've just thrown yourself into a chaotic, overlapping web of international regulations.
Exactly.
Principle 4 addresses untangling that global web of compliance. It is incredibly complex. You have data protection laws like GDPR in Europe and CCPA in California, and you have stringent cybersecurity frameworks emerging constantly.
I noticed a very specific detail in the text regarding this expansion. The blueprint mentions something called DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act.
Oh, yes.
It seems incredibly niche. I mean, if I'm a SaaS startup, software as a service, based in Texas, building a neat little cloud analytics tool, why do I care about a European financial regulation?
Looking at how interconnected our digital supply chains are today answers that question. The source uses DORA to illustrate a massive trap for growing companies.
What kind of trap?
Well, you might be a SaaS startup in Texas, but if your analytics tool processes data for a financial services client in France or Germany, DORA applies directly to you.
Wait, really? Oh, because my software is now a load-bearing pillar in their operational resilience. If my Texas servers go down, the European bank goes down.
Precisely. And without a cohesive GRC foundation, a startup in that position ends up playing a terrible game of catch-up. They scramble to meet GDPR, then they completely rebuild their processes to meet CCPA, and then they start over again to meet DORA.
That creates massive duplicative engineering work. It's like trying to paint a house while someone keeps handing you completely different architectural blueprints every hour.
That's exactly what it feels like.
So how do you make it sustainable? If every country has a different blueprint, what is the mechanical solution?
The central mantra provided in the text is build once, map many. The solution is harmonization through unified compliance frameworks like HITRE REST or the Secure Controls Framework.
Build once, map many. How does that actually function under the hood?
When you look closely at these different regulations, SOC2, ISO 27001, GDPR, they are often asking for the exact same underlying technical action.
You mean example?
For instance, they all require that sensitive data be encrypted while it is sitting in a database.
So you don't need your engineers to perform 3 separate encryption tasks for 3 different audits?
You perform the action once. You configure the database to encrypt the data. Then, your automated GRC platform tags that single technical action as hard evidence for SOC2 and for ISO and for GDPR simultaneously.
You build one scalable foundation of baseline controls rather than managing 30 different one-off checklists.
Right.
Which obviously saves hundreds of hours of engineering time. But does that cover everything? You just map the baseline globally, and you are completely shielded from international regulators.
Not entirely. The text makes a crucial, nuanced distinction. You harmonize the baseline, but you must localize where it matters.
Localize where it matters. What does that look like in a real-world deployment?
It means adapting intelligently to specific regional legal quirks that cannot be generalized by a unified framework. The source points heavily to strict data sovereignty laws.
Oh, like data residency.
Exactly. For instance, the LGPD in Brazil or the PDPA in Singapore. You can have a beautifully harmonized security posture globally, but if Brazilian law dictates that the data of Brazilian citizens cannot legally leave servers physically located within the country, you have to implement localized data residency controls.
So the global baseline keeps the data encrypted and safe, but the localization ensures the physical server rack is sitting in Rio de Janeiro, not Dallas.
Exactly. Or you might need localized breach notification procedures based on that specific region's response timeline laws. The unified framework handles 90% of the heavy lifting.
Giving your team the bandwidth to manage that last 10% of regional complexity.
Right.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Whether you are writing the code, pitching the product to investors, or managing the IT infrastructure, the message from this source is incredibly clear.
GRC has to undergo a fundamental identity shift.
Yes. It has to move away from being tactical, siloed, and static. It must become strategic, embedded directly into the developer workflow, and iterative.
Security is no longer just a defensive shield you throw up to stop bad things from happening. It is a competitive advantage.
The most important takeaway here is about practical application, right? Knowledge only holds value when it is applied to the real world.
Absolutely. The bottom line from this blueprint is profound. Security that is mathematically right-sized, embedded without friction, and genuinely aligned with your business goals doesn't just protect your growth.
It actively accelerates it.
Yes, it shortens the sales cycles with massive enterprise buyers, it builds undeniable buyer confidence, and it frees your developers to innovate safely.
It is the high-performance brakes on the race car. They don't slow you down. They let you corner at 200 miles an hour without flying off the track.
Exactly.
But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something that builds on everything we've just unpacked about trust and transparency. If automated compliance, continuous control monitoring through APIs, and these highly transparent public trust centers become the absolute, undeniable baseline standard for every software company over the next few years.
Which they probably will.
Right. How will the next generation of startups differentiate their trust?
That's a great question. If every single company has the exact same automated SOC2 badge on their website, the value of that badge as a unique market differentiator drops to zero.
Exactly. Will we see companies moving toward radical transparency to stand out, like real-time, completely open source security audits where enterprise buyers can literally log in and watch a startup's threat models update live minute by minute?
Oh, wow. That would be wild.
If trust is the ultimate currency, how far will companies go to prove they have it? Something to think about the next time you're hurtling toward a hairpin turn, hoping your brakes hold up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.